Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Prince George Daily News panel discussion live on Facebook and wherever else you can find this. I guess it's probably just on Facebook. But I'm Bill Phillips. I'm your host. I have with us today Tracy Calogheros, Chuck Nisbett, and Mackenzie Kerr. Todd Corrigal, who usually joins us, is not available today. So it's just the four of us, and we're going to dive right into some of the big story this week, and that's all about we and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this week issued an apology of sorts for not recusing himself when the issue of granting we a contract to administer a jobs program came before cabinet, and he's on all kinds of hot water, and he's apologizing again for conduct possibly unbecoming because there is an ethics investigation. Mackenzie, what's your take on this? Do you think Trudeau has gone too far with this one, or
Tracy can go first if you want, because they're just blending coffee, so I'll wait 30 seconds.
Oh, let's go to Tracy.
That's one way to get out of it.
The joys of Zoom. There is background noise occasionally, so.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if it's gone too far or just really lousy advice. I don't know how anybody in the group, well, let me start that over. I understand how it happened. Everybody's exhausted in the entire country. And I mean, I can only speak to what I do here. I'm exhausted, and when I'm making choices, it's about places I have relationships with and people that are going to help me to deal with drinking out of a fire hose as we work our way through the various international crises that we're dealing with. For a prime minister and a cabinet, I mean, they're rolling out programs faster than Netflix. So I can see them looking to another organization to administer it. Handing it over to the We Foundation and not recusing yourself, definitely not the most brilliant move in the world, and it certainly looks terrible. I will say, though, that I don't think that there's anything nefarious about it. The speaking fees that have been paid to the members of the Trudeau family are very typical speaking fees. I've booked speakers. I know what they cost to bring in, particularly well-known high names. So I don't think there's anything nefarious involved in all of this. I just think it smells bad, and it was a poor choice. And I really don't understand why there isn't better advice being offered on these sorts of decisions.
Yeah, that would be one of the things that I was looking at is where is the advice that Trudeau's getting? And Finance Minister Bill Morneau also apologized because his daughter works for we, or has worked for we. You kind of wonder where these guys are getting their advice, and who isn't giving them or who isn't counseling them well. You know, you think back to the Aga Khan problem with Trudeau, and that was relatively new in his term, and okay, it's bad. Do you think they would learn from that? Chuck, what do you think? They're just, who's advising them, and why aren't they doing their job?
Well, some of these obviously not doing their job. I mean, when you take communications, I mean, I studied communications and journalism, and your idea is to stay ahead of the public opinion, right? That's the whole thing, is to stay ahead and keep an eye out for obstacles. And someone is just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. He's got to have a communications officer. I don't understand how he could get into this same problem 3 times. You know, conflict of interest should be really high on the board right now for everyone to be looking for. So everybody's got to be going, okay, is there a chance of a conflict of interest when we do something like this? You would think, but it just seems to slip by the wayside every time. And this being the 3rd time, I've given Trudeau a lot of credit for a lot of the things he's done, and a lot of leeway on a lot of things that have gone wrong, but 3 times in a row, we're starting to get to the point where you're going, what's going on, people?
Yeah, Mackenzie, what do you think? Is this too much of a pattern here from the Prime Minister that you know, this is the third ethics investigation that has been launched against him. Should we be standing up and saying, something's got to change here?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to get out of it, I promise. I'm in a bad place today. It's very loud here, so I might move after I answer this while you guys are talking. But yeah, I think that we need to hold our politicians to a really high standard. And I think that ethics is incredibly important. And I think that it's kind of falling by the wayside and not at the top of the priority list right now when it comes to these kind of things. And during a pandemic, I mean, lots of things, like you said, have been rolling out. So a lot of things are being missed. And I think that the ethics of removing yourself in situations like this needs to be a priority. And I'm not sure why the people that work for him didn't give him that advice, because I think it is a big issue.
Tracy, we talked about, he's obviously got an army of people working with him and advising him, but shouldn't he have figured this out on his own? I've covered city council meetings for decades and seen councillors, I remember one city councillor once refused to participate in some debate about the golf course simply because he was a member at the golf course and golfed there. He wasn't on the board or anything, but he was a member of the club. So he recused himself from council and said, I'm in a conflict of interest. You guys go ahead without me. That's just kind of basic politics 101 from the very basic levels down, from school board and city councils all the way up, is that he should have noticed that or known that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that this was silliness. I mean, the optics of that should have rung bells for everyone. And I mean, the recommendation came out of the bureaucracy. The only thing I can think is that it's the system-wide exhaustion and the speed with which things are being rolled out, that somehow or other, this was just another one of those, we need to get this program running. We need to help students in the fall. We don't have the capacity within government to do it. Oh, well, we know the We Foundation. They certainly are a good foundation. They absolutely have the capacity to administer this program. But all of that aside, the optics are horrific. Like, it's just silliness. And I take his apology as legitimate. He is really feeling awful about all of this. I don't think this is SNC. I don't even think this is the Aga Khan. This is not about any kind of personal benefit. So I get your point, Chuck, that you're sick of it being 3 times. I don't think it's 3 in a row. I think it is 3 ethics investigations, which actually points to Mackenzie's concern that things are falling through the cracks. I don't think they are. I think they're getting caught. And I think that the push on the part of the Liberals since 2015 to try to be more transparent and to allow more people into the tent is where we are seeing these ethics violations crop up and get caught and get it looked into. And I mean, that's really all we can ask for from our democracy.
Chuck, do you think that we can possibly, not forgive these things, but kind of treat them less seriously when in an issue like this, as opposed to SNC-Lavalin, is that this one is that the heart was in the right place. They're trying to get a program out the door that's going to help people or help students. Should we maybe give them a little bit more leeway because the program is good? I've never been one to say the ends justify the means, but sometimes you can be a little more forgiving.
Well, maybe, yeah, I mean, the circumstances this time are, as Tracy says, a very heavy load on everybody right now, right? And trying to push things through as fast as possible and find an organization that can handle it, and it is a credible organization. This makes sense. I mean, I can see this happening, okay? I just feel like somebody in that office has got to wake up. I mean, somebody's got to be paying attention to what's going on here and saying, we need to make sure that we're clear on this, that we have no skeletons in the closet or barriers up ahead coming, and make sure that they're doing their due diligence to be careful. you know. Yeah, I think we can give them a buy on this one because it is actually using a organization that is very credible, has the resources to do what needed to be done, and he obviously is not personally gaining anything from them. But it just looks bad. It really does.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. Mackenzie, I guess one of the criticisms about this particular or this plan to go with we is that they're handing this over to a private organization. Do you think maybe that the government could have handled something like this? There are student job works programs and that kind of thing already existing. Do you think maybe it's better off if government would handle this?
I think if I was in that position, it would be a very tough decision because there's so many moving pieces right now. I'm not sure what the best direction would have been. I definitely agree that there's so many things happening right now with this pandemic and so many programs that they're trying to roll out quickly that handing off some of them to we or another private organization might have made sense. I don't know how I like the idea of, handing off these kind of programs to private organizations just because privatizing things can be, troubling sometimes. So when we look at the States, like the first thing that comes to mind is healthcare. I mean, it's not the same thing, but when we think of privatizing, that's what I think of. So I think that sometimes handing it off to another organization can be super helpful. It would have been great if it could have been, like student jobs and things like that. But I think right now there's bigger fish to fry. I don't know if that, I don't want to like make it sound like this isn't that important, but I don't think that it was nefarious either. And I think that we need to say, okay, that was bad. Ethics board, investigate this, please. We're going to hold you to a higher standard. Now let's change direction of our course and move on with the pandemic and some of the pressing issues like the opioid crisis and climate change.
You're breaking up a little bit there, Mackenzie. So,
Bill, if I could just jump in there,
all of these transitions and things that we need to be talking about as well.
Just want to jump in there because Mackenzie's having a connection problem, obviously. On the idea of privatization, I think that's the wrong word. The Young Canada Works in Heritage program, which is an ongoing Canadian Heritage funded program, it's been administered by the Canadian Museums Association for over 25 years. And so that's federal funding that the CMA manages the applications. It deals with dispersing the funds and consolidating the reports. So it's actually very typical for the federal government to take nationwide student funding type programs and feed them into organizations that are not for profit and that their goal is within the field where the funding is supposed to be employing students. So it's not unheard of. I think it's a really typical go-to, and I just think it was a lousy choice at this moment.
Yeah, I guess the other fallout from this inadvertently, and sometimes that's what happens when you get involved with politics, is the WE organization itself. They've been around for a while. They're quite a big organization, quite popular, quite successful, and doing a lot of good things. Chuck, do you think maybe they're being a little tarred too irrevocably through this, and it'll hurt them?
Yeah, I think inevitably they're going to suffer from this one, right? I mean, it hits them in a number of ways. I mean, you have Margaret Trudeau taking $250,000 in speaking fees, and Justin Trudeau's brother, Alexander, taking 40 million, I believe is. 40,000, sorry, 40 million. He got a nice upgrade. And, a lot of other speakers are going to be going, well, I'm not getting anything from these people. How's that happening? I mean, very prominent people have come forward and said, yeah, I spoke for them and I never received any payment. And that's ultimately going to hurt their cachet, you know, and allowing and their ability to get people to work with them. So is it going to affect them? I think in the short term, we'll find that it's going to affect them quite a bit. How they manage it and balance things for the long term is going to be very important. They're going to have to do a little bit of spin doctoring here, I think, just to keep things where they are right now without losing more ground.
Mm-hmm. Mackenzie, do you think we can survive all of this?
Tracy, did you want to go? Something?
I just wanted to say that I know that the fees
On your mind there?
things are typical. I mean, Alexander Trudeau has spoken at conferences that I've been at where I know he was paid a speaker's fee to speak. And sometimes they get people to speak at those same conferences and don't pay anything because they donate their time. So I think it's important to make that distinction. There may be those out there who are speaking for we because they want to speak for them and they do it for no fee. But obviously the Trudeaus have a schedule of what they're charging for their speaking. And it's not just we that's paid them, I guess is my point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, years ago, when I was at the Free Press, we did the Women of the North conference, and we brought in, geez, I can't remember her name now, from CBC, and we paid for her, and there was all the other speakers that we got locally, which we didn't pay at all. So you kind of, you know, some of your premier ones, you do pay for them. So, yeah, Mackenzie, did you want to jump in or try to see if you got if your connection issues or?
Yeah, I can hear you all clearly, but I think when I start talking, it starts to cut out. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. I think it's a bigger discussion of paying speakers for their time, especially when we look at who sits on speaking panels a lot of the time. I've been to a lot. Oh, can you hear me?
You're kind of breaking up again.
Try killing your video, Mackenzie,
Can
and
you
just
hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure why I have. So,
Oh, you're on mute now too.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, hopefully that stays. I think it's a important discussion, kind of a segue point, is who is sitting on these panels and increasing diversity on these panels, because there was a recent retweet that I saw just the other day, and it said, when was the last time that you saw someone under the age of 25 sit on a panel? And when was the last time that you saw a panel of all women, or, you know, BIPOC, or things like that? So I think it's a discussion as well of, well, are we just paying people a very large speaking fee that are, you know, related to the Trudeaus, and not paying people that are local, or things like that? So I think that's interesting to see that they have a very high price and then have not been paid. So I would be interested to see more data on who has and hasn't been paid as well.
Yeah, it is kind of a profession. If you can get on the speaking tours, it's not easy to do though. Chuck, what are your thoughts on whether organizations, especially charities and that, should be a little more even with who they pay? Or?
Well, I think it's been proven. Yeah, the premium speakers, the speakers that have been doing this for a while and are sought after, are going to ask quite a fee, right? You know, I mean, it's supply and demand, and that's just the way it works. But when you're working with a charity, I think you have to be a little more careful about how you go about these things, right? I know that many charitable groups will want speakers, a specific speaker at their event, but maybe you've got to consider how much they're going to be cutting into your budget, and look for alternatives if it's a significant amount, right? Yeah, I don't know if these people, if we can continue to operate that way. I mean, $250,000 is a significant amount of money for any organization, and for a charitable organization, that's a big chunk.
You got to keep in mind though, Chuck, when you have a big name, you can sell tickets to see that big name. Like, people will pay to come and see Colonel Hadfield. They're not going to pay to come and listen to me jaw at them. So I think that there's a lot of those considerations being made as well. I know when Colonel Hadfield's a great example. We partnered with the university's Ewart dinner to bring him into town so that the two organizations could afford to have him. And he was willing to do both events for one fee because we were both charities. So
that makes sense.
Yeah,
it does. It really does, because I know, yeah, you can, if you do, you say, we've got so-and-so, we've got Margaret Trudeau, and people are going to go, hey, yeah, I want to hear what she's got to say, you know? So yeah, it does make sense that way too. But, you know, where's the line? I mean, like I say, $250,000, that's a lot of cash.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think that's one fee. I think that was over a number of engagements, but
I
still.
think that was over a few years, yeah. And
Yeah.
personally, I'd pay to see Chris Hadfield, but not Margaret Trudeau.
Exactly.
well,
Me too.
you know, a $25,000 speaking fee is not unheard of. That is not a crazy number. $50,000 is not unheard of. You look at a Michelle Obama and the kind of fees that she commands. You know, you have to really look at the event. And I don't know when the Trudeaus spoke for we, or in what events, or in what capacity, but I suspect that it was either sponsored or was a ticketed event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right on. And it looks like we have Mackenzie back. Any last thoughts on the whole we controversy before we switch on to something else for Mackenzie? Should we kind of...
First of all, why don't we have full service at our university? Everywhere in the university. Good
point.
There's dead spots and like places with one bar and like weak Wi-Fi. Yeah, anyways, different topic. Yeah, I think we need to do an investigation. And I mean, I'm definitely not equipped to have all of the information to speak eloquently on this topic that much. I mean, I think that we need to put our trust in the investigation process and make sure that our biases, you know, our ethics are put to the highest degree of importance, and remove ourselves when we're at all related. Like someone brought up, you know, city councilors remove themselves from golf course things when they've played there before. That's the kind of, you know, overly, like some would say like, oh, that's overboard. That's where we need to hold our politicians at every level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I remember once a judge recused himself from a case because the guy come before him and he worked at a gas station and he'd pump gas for him. You know, so it's kind of tough. It's a fine line, and I guess when it comes to politicians, we have to draw that line. But switching topics a little bit, or a lot actually. Getting back onto COVID-19 and the pandemic and the impact it's having on the city. The city announced this week that they're going to keep the arenas closed because of the pandemic, and they're looking at a budget shortfall of about $9 million this year because of the pandemic, because the arenas are closed, the civic center's closed, and all that kind of stuff, and they're just not bringing in the revenue. Chuck, what's your thoughts on this? Is that something that the city can absorb, or what should they do to absorb it?
Well, I feel that it's something that is inevitable. And yeah, I think we're going to have to absorb it and just go with it. I mean, it's not something that was planned for, right? We didn't all plan to have a pandemic this year. You know, and there's going to be fallout, and I think the city budget is part of the major fallout of this. They're dealing with a lot of shortfalls from income from different arenas and venues throughout the city, but they're also going going to be having to put out more money for social distancing expenses and PPE and things like that, right? So yeah, I can see why we would have a shortfall, and I think we're all going to have to accept that that's the way it's going to be this year. That said, maybe the city, I know they've done a lot of hiring cuts and things and layoffs for temporary programs and student programs and things like that. I wonder how we can avoid that kind of situation. I mean, because we're pushing on the problem onto a different level of government when that happens, right? You've got all those temporary and seasonal programs and employment positions that are falling now to, is it CERB that's going to be looking after them, or student payments being picked up because they're not going to have any kind of work to get money for school in the fall? You know, it just moves it all on to the province and then on to the federal government. And what's the federal fee at, or deficit at right now? I mean, it's pretty high. So is there another way of doing things? I'm not really sure, but I really think we need to be looking hard and see what we can do.
Yeah, Tracy, it's a little strange that there's a bit of a dichotomy here, where on the federal level we're creating programs to put people to work, but on the civic level they have no money, so they're probably going to have to lay people off. Do you think maybe cities should be allowed to be like the feds or the province and borrow a little bit of money to keep people employed, because that certainly helps everything through all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think their layoffs are somewhere around 130 staff have been laid off already. And really, if the federal and the provincial government don't get down to business and start working with municipalities, there's going to be more painful service cuts coming. I mean, there's a difference between your capital budget and your operating budget. Now, granted, $9 million is a huge number to me, but when you're talking about a city budget of 168, 169 million, we're really only talking about a 5% variance to plan. It's not a huge amount of money, or a huge percentage in terms of a shortfall on a year. And so when you're talking about having to dig into the Municipal Finance Authority in order to fund that shortfall, it's a low interest rate. They can borrow it better than we can. But I really do think that we need to start talking at all levels of government, Indigenous, municipal, provincial, federal, and coordinating this burgeoning debt that we've gone into to protect Canadians and to keep us safe and to try and create an economy for the future. But we need to look at how that's going to net out. And instead of just passing it between the various levels, I think we would probably be better served if we could look at it holistically.
Mackenzie, what are your thoughts on the the city's not estimated $9 million shortfall, and what any ideas on how we can deal with that, or the city can deal with that?
Well, that's the $9 million question, I suppose. Yeah, I think that it's inevitable. Like Chuck said, we just kind of have to accept it and now move forward on how we can work on that. It's to protect all of us, and I don't think that we should be opening the arenas or anything like that. I think it's completely reasonable and the safest way forward. So I don't think that that's a wrong decision or anything like that. I think that's exactly what we need to be doing. As for how to make that smaller and not have such a giant number there, I think that it's the perfect time to transition and diversify our economy and, start gaining some money from other avenues than just our, forestry and oil and gas. Like, I think it's the perfect time, because everything right now is in an upheaval. It's the perfect time to start, investments. People are out of money, so that's kind of hard for us to be pouring a lot of investments into new projects. But I think we need to be looking very creatively and to be talking about the future and not just using the status quo and things that are easy. We need to be, looking at projects that are not just, I think this was actually Sonia Firstenau's quote the other day, not just shovel ready, but shovel worthy. not just projects that are, you know, easy and ready to go, but projects that are going to move us into the future and put us on a better path forward. And I think that's where we can gain a lot of new funds. And that's a perfect way for us to use this time to diversify our economy that we've been talking about forever and ever and ever. And what a perfect time. And I think that's what we're going to need to do, and not just, you know, have a few people at the table talking about the creative ideas forward. Everyone needs to be there giving their opinion. I'm not sure what the best way to do that is, whether it's, you know, bringing all the professionals in our town together that could work on this, and not-for-profits and surveys and, you know, things like that. But I think there needs to be a lot of effort put into, how do you want to move forward? Are you ready to do a transition? Because I think that's what we need to do right now.
I think too, it's important to note that civics, like the city, only has so many places to go to for revenue. And so areas like property tax, when you start to look at some of these new buildings going up, new hotels that are coming to town, I think we have some really bright lights on the horizon that this council has been working towards for a number of years. So it's lousy to be having a deficit right now. I don't think anybody should be surprised that we're having a deficit on our annual budget in this particular crazy year. And I think closing rinks and pools is actually one way to mitigate, because the minute you open up, you start losing money on them. And it's very similar to the situation that the museum's in. While you're closed, you aren't spending all of that extra money. The fees that pay, as large as they are, don't come near to covering the costs of operating those arenas. And I'm saying that as a goalie wife and a goalie mom who really wants her boys on the ice.
Yeah, Mackenzie makes a good point, Chuck, about shovel-ready projects. And one of the ones that is shovel-ready is the replacement of the Four Seasons pool. And we're all kind of geared to go. And they just announced a couple of weeks ago, we got $10 million in federal money for that. Should we maybe be having a relook at whether we want to go ahead with that? That's $35 million or over $40 million by the time all is said and done.
If you put it on the back burner, it's just going to make the current situation worse with the city. The present Four Seasons pool is in bad shape. And, you know, you maybe not be using it right now, but it's still deteriorating, right? And I feel you have to go ahead with a project like that, especially it's half done. You know, the land prep and everything is done, and they're starting to build it up. You have to go ahead with a project like that and make sure that you meet your goals of keeping the city viable when things return back to normal, right? I mean, if you stop now, you're going to be faced with that same problem down the road. And we don't want that. Mackenzie's right about the looking for other revenue streams and other ways of positioning the city. But you may be able to do that now, to be able to look at it, but some of that's going to take some serious money to instigate. And maybe now is the time to discuss and get ready and start looking forward to what we can do when things open back up again. But I don't think we're going to be able to jump on a lot of those possibilities right now. You know, I mean, it's going to cost some money to change the focus of this city, you know, and I don't know if we've got it right now, straight up.
Yeah, Mackenzie, the Four Seasons replacement pool, do you agree with Chuck there that we're probably a little too far gone to really do much to change that, or do you think we can?
No, I think it's the right path forward to continue with it and not stop it. I don't think that we should be stopping that. It's also employing people while we're building it. You know, I've lots of construction down there right now during COVID. So I think it's great. It's keeping people employed, and it'll be perfect when we come out the other end. And we just got $10 million to help us with it, right? So that's not, a lot of that money's not on our backs. That's federal government money, provincial government money, I think. So yeah, I think it's perfect, and it needs to keep going, because then when we come out of it, we'll have this revenue stream ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tracy, but will we have a revenue stream with the pools, with the social distancing Are you, Tracy, are you hopeful that we will when we come out of this? It'll be probably at least 2 or 3 years before that pool is finished anyways, and hopefully we will be post-COVID by then.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of confidence in science. I do believe that the entire world is motivated to try and find our way through this, and whether it becomes something that we live with and we have better therapeutics or something that we can find a vaccination for, I have confidence that the right worldwide minds are working on this project. And I agree that the pool is one of those that needs to go forward, particularly if what we want to do is attract those lower mainland refugees, as Bob Simpson likes to call them. You know, there is going to be a new renaissance, I believe, in rural Canada. We've proven that we can work remotely. Without the connections at the university, we really should fix that. But generally speaking, people can do what we're doing right now, and a lot of folks can work remotely. That means who the heck wants to stay in a little tiny box in downtown Vancouver or Toronto when you can have a home and a yard and access to the wilderness? That's where I think Prince George has the opportunity to reposition themselves right now. And if we start hacking back on projects like that pool, not only is it not going to help our current operating budget, because again, it's capital money, not operating money, but it's also going to cut into what we have to offer when we're trying to attract those new families and businesses to the north.
Mm-hmm. Chuck, I think we're all agreed that the pool is not something to cut back on, but if we have to, do you see areas where the city can cut back and reduce some of its deficit?
That's something that's going to take a little studying, some, what do you call it, forensic accounting. You know, I mean, you're going to have to be going through the city's books and looking and seeing what needs to be and what needs not to be right now, you know. It's going to take a bigger brain than mine, because when I do my books, it takes me forever.
Doesn't take me long, but my accountant doesn't like what I do.
That's another thing, exactly. But yeah, I mean, there's going to have to be some hard looks at where things can be cut in the city. I'm not sure if it's going to be, you know, capital projects like the pool, but more programs that are maybe some of the smaller programs that aren't really bringing a big benefit or not really affecting a lot of people. They can cut back, but you have to be careful with that, because it's often the ones that are small that those specialized group of people really count on. You know, I'm talking about the homeless and the disadvantaged in town. So, you know, let's be careful where the cuts are made. Let's think about it hard before you do make cuts, because a cut to a program that may not be a large amount of money can affect a small group or even a large group very heavily with just a small cut of money, you know. So we have to be very careful how we go about making cuts. And I think the city's got a big job ahead of them. And I know they've got some very strong financial people in the city crew, but I really hope that they're not just going, well, we can get rid of that, we can get rid of this quick and easy, right? Just pay attention to what those things that you cut do socially as well as financially.
And Mackenzie, we talk a lot about the city, but one of the other players around here that we don't talk enough about probably is the regional district. I'm sure they're going through the some of the similar issues, and I don't know if you're familiar with them at all, but I guess that's the other one that we have to kind of pay attention to as to what's going on, because they actually run the landfill, which everybody thinks is the city, but it's the regional district. So do you fear possibly we could be hearing bad news from them as well, and you know, kind of get hit on both on another level?
Yeah, I think every single, you know, like level of government right now is struggling to keep up. And I think that includes regional district. But I did have a point that I wanted to add as Chuck was talking. I have an idea of somewhere we can decrease funds. I mean, of course, this would not be a quick decision. This would take a lot of planning and figuring out the exact details, but defunding the police, I think, should be looked at, because the budget for the police is absolutely astronomical, and all of these social programs in town need more support. So if we shift those funds, we will have a lot of solutions to some of the problems that we're seeing happening right now. So I think that's somewhere that if we are talking about shifting funds around and decreasing, budgets, and, we're running out of money, where are we going to shift things? I think we will save more money in the long run if we invest in some of these social programs for homelessness and poverty reduction and mental health help and addiction services, because I think that we will save, and studies show we will save more money by putting money into that than just policing. So that needs to be a discussion, and I'm happy to see that the councillor Sampson has put forward an exploratory, I suppose, request for City Council to look at CAR 60 program and expanding it, but we can't stop there. We also need to talk about policing in general, not just the CAR 60 program. So.
Yeah, good points, Tracy. What do you think? Defunding, I think that's one of the worst words to use, but that's the one that is used. It's not really defunding the police; it's reallocating funding, I guess. And I agree with that. I know a couple of years ago, they want to station officers at Caribou Rocks the North around the clock. All that's there. It's kind of like, yeah, no man, do you really need to be at there? But that's another story. What are your thoughts on how we can do this, how we can reallocate some funding from police? Because here the police come to council every year, and they're looking for more money every year for more officers, costs go up, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think defund is the wrong word, because it isn't like we're going to save any money. We want to take the money that we're not applying to the RCMP and apply it to these other social services. And Mackenzie's absolutely right that if you invest in holistic wraparound services, particularly around addictions, you see decreases in crime, you see better outcomes health-wise, and you reduce expenses on other parts of the organizations that are the city and the province. But I'm not sure where you can cut at the city, given that their primary source for revenue is in property taxes, and their role is providing services to citizens. So no one's going to be okay with us no longer opening up the end of their driveway when we're plowing. So, okay, fine. We leave the windrows in place. We're going to save money because it will take us so long to do it. But now you got to shovel the end of your own driveway. It's a 6 of one, half dozen of the other. My big fear is that there will be a knee-jerk reaction to a $9 million deficit, because folks are focused on that number instead of on the fact that it's a 5% shortfall in a catastrophic year, and people should actually be pretty proud of that. And so then the only place to really go are grants and programs. If you're not willing to cut snow removal, then you got to be looking at cultural festivals, the Heritage Commission, the support for downtown Prince George, permissive tax exemptions for churches. There's only so many places you can go, and the community would really need to understand what those cuts look like. I really believe that long term, Prince George is growing. The city is going to have more residents. We are attracting new business at record rates. The building that is happening here is not slowing down. I think what we need to do is stay the course, accept the fact that we're coming out of this year with a deficit, continue to work hard on the other levels of government to try and find a way to coordinate these debts, and look to the next 5 or 10 years as we reemerge at the backside of this as the place to go in Canada if what you're looking for is a professional life and a quality of life that combines not just anything you want in an urban environment, but everything that is so great about Canada in our wilderness.
Chuck, you're nodding your head there. You obviously agree with that. You think we can go somewhere. This is a time to take advantage and start promoting Prince George, like you say, or we were talking about earlier, a place that you can come, you can work remotely, you can enjoy nature. I think we've been doing that, but maybe we need to do more of that.
Yeah, I think Tracy made a lot of good points there. Prince George has everything going for it that you need. you can promote it as a place where you can do your work, you can reach everybody world over from here, and not have to deal with the 45-minute commute or the hour and a half, 2-hour commute to get in and out to work, right? I think it's the way forward for us, but it's not a quick fix, right? And people are going to have to accept the fact that, yeah, $9 million more than we expected. Okay, you know, that's a 5% overpayment of what we're going to have to deal with. But nobody predicted the coronavirus. You know, this is a global pandemic. You've got to expect that it's going to cost to work with it, you know, and people have to just say, okay, yeah, it's here, we're dealing with it, and it's going to cost money to deal with it. So we've just got to suck it up and go with it. You know, it's funny, and to be very truthful, I am a regional district employee, so I must make sure that everybody knows.
Oh, yeah. We don't want to get you in trouble, Chuck. No.
No, I don't want to get in trouble either. But I talk to a lot of people daily, you know, in my job. And some people really don't believe that there's a problem with COVID. You know, and that is because we live here and we haven't seen it. But I have family in England, I have family in Miami, I have family in New York. Those are 3 brothers that live in England, New York, and Miami. And it's a huge, huge problem. You know, in England, we're informed by family of the people who have passed that we knew. In Miami, I'm told of how many 1,000 cases they have a day. In New York, I've got a brother who works in the hospital in New York, and he's told of how many 1,000 new cases they have every day at that hospital. Wow. You know, it's huge, but people don't believe it because we haven't seen it here in the North. And I keep trying to explain to people that we're a very small population in a very large area. And we don't face the same problems that they do in those large population centers where everyone's jammed together and it just gets passed from one to the other really quickly. Here, we've been able to bring it to a halt. Thank God for that. I mean, I've got to give the BC government and medical services a huge, huge yay on that one. They've really done a great job. But those big centers, they're really facing a horrible thing. And if it ever got to that point here, there's not very much population to survive it. So, you know, you don't want 20% of your population being sick, you know, and what is it? It's like 4 or 5% now, I believe, passing or getting close to passing.
Yeah. So,
you know, we need to realize that COVID is a real thing, and yeah, it's going to take not just this year, but maybe a couple of years, 3 years, maybe 4 years to work our way out of this, right? And people have to be ready for that and how much it's going to cost to do it.
Absolutely. We're coming up on our time, so we'll go around quickly for everyone with some parting words of wisdom or not wisdom, or anything you'd like to say. We'll start with Mackenzie.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to steal Tracy's idea from last time and encourage people to wear their masks and be safe and buy some reusable masks. Yeah. I think right now we just need to, you know, be safe, stay in our bubbles of our community members and, you know, continue on. And I think that, you know, producing our own food this summer is the smartest thing that you can be doing, because grocery prices are spiking. And I mean, that's what I'm spending my whole summer doing, working at the university. And head down to the farmers market and buy local, because we need to be supporting our local economies and doing that as much as possible, and shopping local, not just buying all from Amazon, because it's so easy during COVID. And that's, you know, I think super important right now. So yeah, those are my parting words.
Excellent. Tracy?
You're here. I agree with Mackenzie on all of her points there. I think COVID is not gone. It is definitely coming back in a second wave, and we're not past it yet. But I do like the conversation we were having around growth in Prince George, and ultimately, I think we will be able to market us as the kind of community that will be here post-COVID and into the future. You know, I winced a bit when Chuck, you said that there was no prediction of the pandemic. Well, there's been epidemiologists talking about pandemics and that it's just a matter of time for decades. And this won't be our last pandemic either. So I've said before, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think that this could become a really great opportunity for Prince George coming out of this. So it's just stay safe for now, wear your masks, and be kind to those that can't, I suppose. That's also important.
Chuck, parting words?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that Mackenzie and Tracy have said, and I believe that we can come out of this stronger than the way we went in. It may take a few years. I don't think anything's going to really stop with COVID until a vaccine is proven and distributed. So yeah, 2, 3, however many years it takes. But I think that Prince George is going to be in a really, really strong position after that, because people are going to be looking around going, well, I lived in New York during that, and it was horrible. And these people lived in Prince George, and they didn't seem to be too bad off. So expect growth. It's going to come. You know, we've already had it. It's already been coming. People have been seeing the change in lifestyles. I expect it to come more in the next 10 years. You'll see Prince George grow significantly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. We all live here, so we all know it's, you know, the benefits here. And I think people that, you know, if you're crammed into a big city and you're right up to next to a lot of people, you got to be thinking, if you can get out now, it's a good time to get out. So anyways, that's it for this week. I want to thank our panelists, Tracy Calogheros, Chuck Nisbett, and Mackenzie Kerr, and we will be back again next week.